Good morning, everyone. This is the July 11th regular public meeting. I'd like to call the meeting to order and ask you if you may be able to stand and do the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States and to the republic one under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. At this point, I'll call on my colleague for the minutes.
Good morning, everybody. We've reviewed the minutes of our meetings last week. I have no corrections to suggest, and I move their adoption.
I may look for comments. Anybody have any comments, questions? Hearing none, I call for the vote. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
I also vote aye. The motion passes. We have quite an agenda today, and I think we will be pressing time, so I will try to be as brief as I possibly can. Please don't laugh at that. The consent agenda is as follows: a call for hearing, a call for a public hearing to consider the request for a 10-year non-exclusive telecom franchise from Sprint Communications, LP, and it's just a county right of ways. And that call for hearing is scheduled, the hearing is scheduled for the 1st of August at 9:45. We also have a call for bids. Call for bid for the headquarter landfill transportation of rock material, also for that same date, August 1. We have a number of contracts and agreements, bid awards to declare. The completion letter to Hilander Painting for the exterior paint of the boathouse, which is a training center, but a stone's throw away from the Hall of Justice. The total cost is $8,493, including the Washington State sales tax. We have an amendment to extend the date of the original contract from Columbia County to house juveniles from their counties in the Cowlitz County Juvenile Detention Facility. We have a completion letter to Battery Power Solutions for the UPS battery replacement project at the Hall of Justice. We talked about that not that long ago. This is the completion. The total is $30,611, including Washington sales tax. We have a contract with Specialized Pavement Markings for the 2023 Joint Agency Striping Project. Total amount is a lot, $884,032. Next, we have amendment number 5 to the personal services agreement with Epic Land Services, Inc. for consulting services to cover the right-of-way phase of the Eric Creek, the culvert replacement project. The amount will increase by $15,000 for a total of $245,000. We next have an agreement with ArcGIS Software and Services from ESRI, the Environmental Systems Research Institute, for presentation, analysis, and printing, as well as enterprise service-based software for deploying web maps and applications. Total amount is $203,741.68. Next, amendment number 1 to the professional services agreement from Windsor Engineers for the design of a cast-in-place concrete tank. This will increase the amount of the agreement by $8,800 for a total of $88,500. Next, we have a perpetual right-of-way and utility easement for county road for 6,647 square feet of real property to accommodate the slide repair work on Cathlamet Road. We have a resolution rescinding resolution number 22-060 and continuing relationships with the Washington County's Rescue Pool and the related appointments and designations for each member of the county. Specifically, what that is we have to identify who the pertinent individuals are in the county, and there has been some change. And that change we will find starts in letter 12A, a letter dated June 29th from Victoria Blosl announcing her resignation as the county risk and safety manager. Next, we have the usual advisories from the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, and that just keeps us up to date on situations with the dams. If there ever is any significant issue, you will be apprised of that. We have a letter dated June 11th to Darcy Mitchem, reappointing her to the Parks and Recreation Advisory Board. This is a 6-year term that expires December 31 of 2029. Next, we have a letter dated July 11, 2023 to James Wasik, appointing him to the Silver Lake Watershed Advisory Council. This is a 4-year term that expires January 31 of 2027. And then we have a bunch of money that we spent in terms of vouchers to the tune of $4,401,508.69. That is the total of the consent agenda. If there are questions from the public or the staff or anyone, please feel free to come up and ask about them. Remember, you don't have to identify yourself.
Good morning. Just kind of a clarification, I guess, for me. I both number 7 and number 9 are amendments to a contract we have, and to me, I've always looked at these as change orders. I don't understand why, if we had an original amount and an agreement to get something done, all of a sudden we come back and like on 7, we're amendment number 5, and we're adding another 15,000. Explains what's being done, but why wasn't that part of the original contract? Same with the one on number 9. You know, we're $8,800 additional. Would not that cast in place concrete tank be concluded in the original contract?
In reverse order, that amendment item 9 is during the analysis, it was determined that that you would save a lot if you did do a cast in place tank. So the issue is spend $8,800 now to design the tank, or go ahead and buy the tank and all the associated effort and install that. And I think the savings was fairly substantial. We have Susan Eugenis heading this way, and I think she has the actual amount. By the way, your comment and catch on these are excellent. So I certainly appreciate that.
So the amendment to Windsor Engineering, originally they were planning on purchasing a pre-made tank, which you buy off the shelf. And then when they were doing their analysis, they determined that if instead they designed a cast in place, it would save the county over $50,000. So we're spending about $9,000 to save $50,000 during the construction phase. So it was not work that was originally in their contract.
So if I could pursue his question, then did we not foresee this possibility in the beginning?
That is why we looked at the alternatives, but it was not something that when we went through their task order, in general, it's usually less expensive to buy something off the shelf, but in this case, it turned out not to be, which is why we didn't include that design money in their original contract.
And as long as you're there, would you care to address the PSA with Epic Land Services?
So Epic Land Services is one of our as-needed contracts. So we set an initial amount when we signed the contract that we think over the 2-year time period that we set the contract, we're going to spend $200,000. But in this case, we have spent more than what we initially anticipated, and it's a by task. So they tell us what it costs to do an appraisal or to do this is a negotiation company, to do the negotiations for property by the properties that we're addressing. And so we negotiate the price every time we're doing that, but we have a blanket contract that we draw against. So this is increasing the blanket contract that we have.
Well, and what are they doing that we didn't know ahead of time that now we're already, I mean, we get another 15,000 next month and another 15 the month after that, or when's the contract?
This contract, this company does property negotiations when we're doing public works contracts. So they contact the owners and say, the county needs 2,000 square feet along the frontage of your property. We've had an appraisal. This is the amount the appraisal says. They work through them with all their rights of getting a different appraisal, and they work all the paperwork with the property owner and get it signed and stamped. So they would only need additional money if something very strange happened on this project, where this is just a strip along the frontage of the properties that are involved in the project. So for this particular acquisition, there will not be an additional request. They are at the end of their contract life, and we are currently negotiating new contracts, but this project has a very tight timeline. So instead of waiting until we had the new contracts, we added it on to this contract so we can get it finished and the project moving.
If I could add on that, there's a magic in here. The reason this PSA is in there, it's actually doing its job of forcing it to appear in public when we go beyond a threshold. So rather than have, well, we think we might spend 245, but because things do happen, like the Cathlamet slide or something like that, why don't we just make it 500? If we do that, we will not squander it, but you won't see where the other chunk of money went. In this way, you have an opportunity to challenge us. Like I said, when you came up, you have some good questions.
And thanks for the answers. Thanks.
Thank you. I see no hands up.
All right.
You have comments?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move that we approve the consent agenda as presented this morning.
Any further comments? We see no hands, no other comments. Let's call for the vote. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
I also vote aye. Motion passes. Thank you. Next, we go to the motion items, and we're doing pretty nicely on time. Please, the floor is yours.
Morning, Commissioners. Patrick Harbison, Public Works. With me is Susan Eugene as County Engineer. First motion we have before you is an amendment to the professional services agreement with Gibbs Olson for the Woodbrook Wastewater Treatment Plant Alternative Study. When we met with the Department of Ecology, they informed us that before we address any alternatives, we needed to do an I&I analysis and address that issue before we knew exactly how much flow was entering the plant. And so Gibbs and Olson gave us their scope and estimate to do that analysis for $101,400, and that's the amendment.
I.
Inflow and infiltration, so any water that enters through any of the cracks or joints in the pipes or manholes or anything like that.
Dennis, you have a lot of history in this. Any comments?
So with shifting soils, there are cracks that occur with sewer lines. We want to try to identify them and block them, so we don't end up charging the customers for treating rainwater, because that's what's infiltrated. So this is a scientific study. Now, originally, we weren't planning on doing that because, you know, we were ordered to make some changes by the state, and then in their review, they came back and said, okay, you need to take a whole nother year to do this more extensive study. So it's going to cost more, but the study is being paid for in part by a grant from ecology, right? Or it's all coming out of the reserves.
Yes.
Okay.
If you wouldn't mind, how many people are served and what kind of plant is this?
So the treatment plant is a lagoon system. It serves approximately 60 houses in the Woodbrook neighborhood.
And the effluent goes out to the creek now?
To Ostrander Creek, yes.
And this is because there've been structurally the facility there now really needs to be redone in one form or another.
Correct.
So you're trying to find out what it is you have to do. to
Correct.
fix things.
The treatment plant is beyond its design life, and so we're trying to do we're doing an analysis to determine what the best way to either maintain it or replace it, and which shape or form that ecology would accept.
How did we end up being owners of this?
It was best of my knowledge, a development completed off of Ostrander Road. And the commissioners at that time felt that it was a fairly low cost construction, house construction. And so they chose to accept the sewer and water at that point in time.
As part of the developer's agreement with the
Correct.
county?
The developer paid for the construction of it, and then we operate and maintain it.
That was 1980s, 90s,
70s.
1970s. No one's that old.
So one of the challenges we face is that 60 households really can't afford a lot of upkeep and maintenance. We've got a number of small level sewer systems. That cast in place opportunity was another sewer system we've inherited after there was collapse of the original privately owned one. That was for Camelot. And there's about 2 or 3 other ones. And so in order to make it more affordable for all the members, we've bundled them all together because not all of them have the same kind of expenses. And they pay a single rate, I believe.
Correct.
Basically throughout all the different multiple systems. So that helps us to accumulate the reserves so that we can maintain and they do pay a higher rate than cities who share their costs among thousands and thousands and thousands of households and businesses. So
It is slightly higher than the cities, but it's not exorbitantly higher when you compare the cities out of town rates. The cities charge higher rates, usually double when you're out of their city limits.
So do we break even on the fees we charge on that?
Correct. It's a nonprofit, so any rates we collect go directly back into the system.
Including an impressed account or a maintenance account
Correct.
and a replacement account?
Correct. That and the replacement account are our reserves.
Okay, thank you. Any questions from the public? Any hands up? Oh, no.
I guess I'm gonna be a regular up here. is there any thought process if we have a bunch of these little ones and they're all getting older, needing to be addressed, of doing a larger project that encompasses all of them in some way? That then we're looking at one facility, then a lot, instead of a lot of little ones? Or is it just the logistics of it? You can't bring that all together or not? Is there anybody ever thought about that?
Yeah, that is active on any of them. For example, this facility, there's also the alternative of building a pipeline for the sewage to go to the Three Rivers Treatment Plant. And I have all the confidence that the staff is actually doing, okay, which one wins on this trade-off? So we don't have any preconceived notions about what the solution should be.
Okay. But have you thought about that? Or a second larger facility to incorporate all these smaller
I
ones?
think I just said yes, but go ahead.
We have thought about it, but the logistics are very, very difficult. Woodbrook is located about 2 miles up Ostrander. Tootle is located about 11 miles up Spirit Lake Highway.
Okay.
Riderwood is located in Riderwood, if you've ever been there. So taking pipes and combining, bringing them into one central location would be in the hundreds of millions of dollars.
Good answer. You're doing a good job.
So we do review long-term plans, and you do exactly what he's described, and you analyze all the different programs that we have. And I think you're actually the manager for the utilities for the county. So not only sewer systems like this, but also a number of water systems.
Correct.
And fortunately or unfortunately, we're in the situation where when a private developer develops and operates the water system privately, when it fails after the developer is long gone, the county quite often ends up being forced into taking over and absorbing these smaller systems. So it's a moving target. We try not to allow that to happen, but
And we have become more involved with DOH and the private owners to help them make sure that they can help maintain those, so we don't end up putting that on the taxpayer.
Yep.
Excellent point. Yes.
yes, okay. Mr. Chairman, I move that we approve amendment number 1 to the Gibbs Olson Professional Services Agreement as proposed.
We have a motion on the floor to approve the amendment as has been discussed. This is a time for the public to add more comments. No, actually, we're over almost fast enough. I call for the vote. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
I also vote aye. Motion passes. Next is the local agency agreement. In project prospectus.
Yes, this is the local agency agreement with WashDOT for the Cathlamet Road slide repair. In January of 2022, we had a big snow, then a rain event. This is one of our roads that was damaged in that event. It is eligible for, it is a collector, so it is eligible for funding from a WashDOT through the Federal Highways Administration ER fund. We have been working since January of 2022 to come to an agreement with the state for this project's eligibility. So Cathlamet Road, thank you for putting up. This is a picture of the slide. As you can see, it's narrowed the roadway down to 1 lane. This is the connector from Cowlitz County to Cathlamet and is used by the locals when SR4 is shut down. While we have been working up the agreement, we have been working on the design of the solution. So we are getting this agreement in place. We had on the consent agenda, getting the right-of-way, the small bit of right-of-way we needed for the repairs. As soon as all of these are in place, we hope to be going out to bid very shortly so we can get this project done this winter. So the Fed local agency perspective and agreement, it's a description of the project. We are going to reestablish the roadway embankment by building a rock buttress. The agreement is the local agency is responsible for 13.5% of the cost, and the federal agency will provide 86.5% of the cost for the permanent fix. All the temporary emergency items that we completed out there. This is an early picture. We have since put some barriers out there. We've filled in the ditch on the east side of the roadways to widen up the lane out there to give people a little more space. That work is 100% refundable from the state. So once this agreement is in place, we will be reimbursed for the work that we've already done and be able to submit for reimbursement for the construction phase.
You have questions, Dennis?
No, we've workshopped that. I understand the ramifications and appreciate the fact that you've been able to secure 86.5% funding. That's we usually have to kick in a little bit more on these things, but I appreciate that.
Could you put the picture back up? We got a few minutes. I really need to expose the engineering curiosity here. So, and then some of the bureaucracy. This is a Cowlitz County road, while SR4 is a washed-out road.
Yes.
Okay, and the reason they are willing to help in this or take over a lot of the costs is because this is the bypass when SR4 gets blocked.
It is one of our collectors and arterials, and those roads are eligible for the emergency relief funding that they make available when a disaster is declared.
So in this picture, is this the extent of the damage, what we see here?
It extends a little more towards us, but yes, and it goes all the way down to a creek.
And how much is it going to cost in total? It cost us when, in this case, us is the public, regardless of whether it's state or not.
So the total project estimate is $875,000.
And how are they going to, that doesn't, this seems like it would be a continuing problem, and if it's not done very well.
Yes, if you do not do it correctly, they will reactivate is the word the geotechs use. The slide will reactivate. We have had a geotech consultant on board working with us to come up with the design of the fix, and his recommendation was to do a buttress versus a wall. So the contractor will go out there, remove the top layer of the slide material, especially down at the toe. They dig out in a benched procedure, a area to put the buttress in. We fill it back up with a rock buttress. You put an under drain down at the bottom so that you keep the water moving off of the slope, and you key it into the slope, and it keeps it's enough weight. Part of it is the weight holding the earth back from moving forwards.
Got it. Will the size of the road, the width of the road be the same as before?
Yes, we're going back to, I believe it's a 20-foot road with shoulders out there.
And I'm always going to ask a question about opportunity for expansion in case we someday want to put a bicycle path through there. It'd be nice for bicycles to be able to go from Longview to say Long Beach or Astoria. And right now that's a difficult task.
So in this particular situation, because we're doing such a small section of the roadway, we are not expanding it with the wider shoulders like we usually do, because due to the constraints, as you can see, the opposite side of the road goes straight up and this side goes straight down. So we, in order to not have to acquire too much additional right of way, we didn't try to expand it.
Okay, thank you.
Can you give us an example where we've tried this technique before, and in case people are trying to get a good picture in their mind?
So the most recent one we did was on Spencer Creek Road, and that was approximately 2 years ago. There is a rock buttress on Rose Valley Road down near the base. There's one on Bodine. We have several out on Kalama River Road. this is a technique we use quite frequently.
Thank you.
Thank you. Hey, on something like that with the engineers, when the engineering plans are done by consultants, what kind of a warranty do we have on the work?
So on this particular design, our in-house staff actually does the design, and the geotech does a soil analysis and says, this is what you should be constructing out there. Geotechs are notorious. If you've ever read a geotechnical report, the language in the back is we only have the knowledge of the 2 spots or the 3 spots, depending on the study that we dug in. You may go out there and find something completely different because it's buried. So they are very good with that language. But we do require professional liability insurance on any project with a engineer to cover gross errors.
Okay, thank you. Other questions from the public? I don't see, oh, I see a hand up. Oops, the hand is gone.
Ready?
Ready?
Mr. Chairman, I move that we approve the local agency agreement with WashDOT for the Cathlamet River Road slide repair as presented by staff.
Thank you. We have a motion on the floor to approve the local agency agreement as has been discussed. This is the opportunity, the last opportunity before the vote for any comments. Seeing none, I call the vote. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
I also vote aye, and that motion does pass.
Thank you.
Thank you. We are now at a point where our next obligation is the public hearing at 9:45. I'm surprised we're ahead of schedule. This gives us an opportunity for public commentary. I see no hands. I don't see anybody in the public wanting to speak. Yes. Well, what does one do in this situation? Call for a recess?
Well, we can call for recess. We can have 10 minutes of public comment.
Right, and
If we have no public comment, yeah, we can stand at recess until 9:45.
gosh, I hate to waste this time when we can talk in public. Such a rare.
I'm just irked about this, can I speak?
Please do, make sure you,
$4.5 trillion Biden took for infrastructure. And the couple of years that I've been doing my taxes on my house have doubled in the last couple of years. And I'm thinking, with $4.5 trillion in his pocket, I mean, how come he can double our taxes like that? I can't understand that. And I don't understand why nobody says anything about it. Actually, I've been on TV, I've been listening to TV a lot, and you know what? They have a lot a lot of people are saying something about it. But I am just irked about this. I just don't know what to think, what to do, or where to go. Or how to be.
well, my typical answer is gonna be, it's election time. You can take care of your house here and eventually there's a trickle up. If the attitude of the underlying public is strong enough, it will bend the people up north or east that cause a lot of these obligations to occur. The thing you mentioned on your property taxes is sort of interesting because that's probably the tip of the iceberg on the taxes. In addition to those taxes, you got license fees, you got sales tax, and you got federal income tax and you got inflation. And if it's stacked up against you, if you think it's stacked up against you, it is. The only way to stop any of that is by the ballot and by appearing here with insistence on explanations. The gentleman who asked us about the amendments of the contract, exactly what you have to do. Make sure that you know where the money is going. That's why we focus on transparency.
I'm
I
telling you,
sympathize
know-
with you.
I
Yeah.
know where the money's going. It's going in somebody's pocket. And somebody that's way richer than me, as it is written. You know, it is said that the rich get richer and the poor get poorer. And you know what, that's quite possibly true, you know.
Yeah, although the typical answer to that turns out to be a contributor to that. It's to put more power in some police. And the police, in fact, who polices them becomes a problem. And when you say police, there are all these administrative agencies that want to make sure you're doing the right thing. Well,
Yeah.
I could say more, but it'll get me into trouble.
Yeah, well, you know what? Do the right thing, you know, nobody's doing the right thing except for Biden, and that's going in his pocket. The old family is killing us all and nobody gets it. Nobody. gets it.
All right, let's see if anybody else would like to
Thank you.
comment. Thank you, sir.
Good morning. So this is kind of just it's actually Vancouver, but it's something that I think is going to really affect us. Have you heard of the large correction facility down in Yakult? They're talking about closing the large correction center. It's a minimum security prison near Vancouver, opened in 1956. Currently housed around 227 individuals, can house up to 480. They're one of the staples for our wildfire services for DNR crews, for hand crews, and they do a lot of other community service projects. They put the most, I believe they put the most firefighting hours in of any facility in the state, and they've been an instrumental part of our wildland response here in Southwest Washington. But there's a petition right now on Change.org to try and stop them from closing it, because it's been such a success with they have some of the best reintegration services, getting people GEDs, getting jobs, getting in the community. So I have a firefighter friend that's just really up in arms about it, because he said this is going to really, really hurt Cowlitz County's fire response. So I don't know if you guys have heard of that at all.
I haven't, have you, Dennis?
Yeah, it was one of those decisions made in response to the legislature's funding of the department.
Yeah.
You may recall that Southwest Washington also lost the Nacelle Youth Center.
Right.
Again, as they cut back in services throughout Southwest Washington. So it is frustrating when things like that happen. The gentleman before you was talking about higher taxes, and the 45-cent additional gas tax is hitting us.
Yeah.
We now have the highest gas rates in the country, and it's a pure political program that foisted on the majority, foisted on us by the majority. And
yeah, it's killing me. I know that. Yeah, I know the large, they just done a bunch of upgrades this year as well. And I know that that kind of threw off their cost benefit analysis, but then that's also another aspect of the legislation changing laws, is the facilities at such low capacity right now. So I'm sure it looks like it's, really losing money.
the capacity isn't low, the usage is low.
The usage is about half the capacity.
We did hear a report from our jail, however, a little bit of the opposite. Local police are beginning to arrest more people for gross misdemeanor drug charges, and they're heading into jail.
Yeah.
And the jail population is now up and no restrictions.
Yeah,
The latest one. So We,
was
we do what
around.
we can locally, but yeah, state policies are kind of beyond our control.
Yeah, because I think that that's basically the state's complete call on that.
Mhm.
Probably Department of Corrections, I would assume.
Okay, thank you. Yeah. Now you will have to identify yourself.
Cowlitz County Auditor, Carolyn Fundingsland.
Now,
I was-
advertisements do cost money in any other place except Cowlitz County Public.
I'm,
Meetings.
I'm so busted. I was listening to the meeting downstairs and I heard you guys had a couple of extra minutes and this is always a perfect opportunity for me to share information. Local voter pamphlets are hitting your mailboxes and it's already going viral that you'll note on pages 14 to 15 on most pamphlets. Because of the way the pamphlets are bound, you'll see this extra page and Facebook is blowing up saying that pages have been ripped out. Not true. It goes from page 14 to 15. It is simply just the way the printer bound. We asked them to bind it with staples because the glue, we do run the risk of missing pages. So it's created this weird little clipping of page and people think that we have ripped candidates out of the pamphlet. Not true. Just wanted to pass that along.
So interesting that you brought that up. I've had a couple of people ask me, why did they leave out some candidates? And this is a primary election. And as I explained to them, there have to be at least 3 candidates to have a primary. If there are only 2 candidates, they're automatically placed on the general election and you'll get a voter's pamphlet updated with all of the finalists before the November election. So
He's
that may
absolutely
be one
right.
of the other questions about people.
Yeah, it can be
people-
confusing because it differs between a partisan year and a nonpartisan year. So next year, you will see unopposed candidates on your ballot. But in nonpartisan years, the law states that only if there's 3 or more candidates do they appear on the primary. So it can be confusing.
Another quick question about that. So somebody that would not appear on the primary ballot for the reasons just discussed, is there time for someone to file for a write-in?
Yes, absolutely.
So how would that work if there were already 2 on the ballot and the ballot is printed, right? Already?
Right. So when you file as a write-in, your name is not printed on the ballot. So
But-
unless
but
you
that-
run,
But that isn't even on the ballot as a race.
right. So it doesn't appear, that's kind of the caveat of becoming a write-in candidate. I think the legislature sees it as you didn't play by the rules, you didn't do it on time, you didn't pay the fees, so your name isn't printed on the ballot, it's not on the local voter pamphlet. However, we give you the option, you can file up until the day that ballots are mailed, I believe it is. I'd have to look at the statute because it did change recently. If you file by that deadline, you are a qualified candidate and we will track those results and you can win in the primary. And if you persevere in the primary, then your name would be printed in the general election.
But that's only if there's a place on the ballot in the primary.
Yes.
Okay.
And I
so-
believe that's the intent of the legislature, why partisan offices always appear in the primary, regardless of the number of
Okay.
candidates.
But in this hypothetical situation, the write-in candidate would simply not do anything until the general,
Exactly.
and then in the general, that candidate can file.
Correct.
So it's kind of a strange do-nothing problem.
Yes.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you.
You can bill me for the advertising.
100% of the last fee.
Well, it's
Why
going
don't we
to,
take a 2-minute break and give staff an opportunity to come up to the table and get,
how about a minute break?
Yep. we'll do that.
Yes, please, staff, come up to the table as you. You notice the improvement in the picture image?
You want to introduce me? Sure.
Were you answering all those Q&A questions? Thank you. What's a formality on this? Okay. Okay. So the minute, it turned out to be the 2 minutes that my colleague thought made more sense. Thank you. And so let's proceed with the hearing on the Adopt a County Code 18.56. Would the staff please proceed?
Morning, Commissioners. Wayne Nelson, Planning Manager. With me is Adam Trimble, Senior Planner, and he'll be providing the staff report this morning.
All right, thank you. So this is a public hearing to consider replacing or updating our campground and recreation facilities code, which is 18.56 of the Cowlitz County Code. If you want to go to the next for me. Thank you. So these are kind of the cliff notes for this code update. It has been 24 years since the existing campground code was last updated. And I'll just note that at the department level, applicants request about one pre-application meeting per month for new RV parks. So there's continued interest in this particular land use. And what we see in our existing code is that it includes both the health code and the development standards. And that complexity makes compliance difficult. The department, as I understand it, had the environmental health unit within it at one point. And so it made sense that the development code would also contain those health code requirements. But that has since been reorganized at least 12 years ago. And so that environmental health unit is underneath the health department, and that's where all of their rules come from. And so it makes sense to have that section of our development code properly placed in Title 15. So that's part of today's effort, which is both updating the development code and adding that chapter to the health code relating to campgrounds. So on your agenda, you've got a public hearing for this change to Title 18.56, and a new chapter to be added to Title 15 for the health code relating to campgrounds. Continuing on, the existing code does have many parts that are duplicated in other local or state codes. So the effort was made to clean up this code, shorten it, improve its readability. And then one thing that staff hopes to see as a result is an improvement in development predictability for property owners. So just as with any update, that is one of the goals, to make sure that the process is clear as you go through the review and approval stages. And one other big highlight here is that the existing code is a burden for the expansion of an existing park. So we have 26 parks in our county, and those park owners will, from time to time, identify places where they could expand, buildings they want to move or rebuild, even create new spaces within their park. When they come to the department, they are presented with the development code that doesn't have the nuance to deal with a small expansion. It wants to treat each change like a new project, put them through a public hearing possibly. So this update accounts for that, and it provides different ways to deal with small, medium, and large expansions or modifications within existing parks. And I'll just reiterate that the code applies to new projects. So that's really what this is for somebody walking in the door and asking to build a new park. That's where the code will apply. It's not going to be imposed on existing parks unless they are looking to expand or make modifications.
Adam, what is the threshold for an expansion being fully reviewed?
5 spaces in a 5-year period
Okay.
is the threshold.
So up to 5, the threshold of review will be much lower.
An administrative level review, yes.
Okay, thank you.
So at 5 or above, the whole park then has to come into compliance?
Code provides more nuance for us to review those changes. So that 6th space, for example, in that scenario, we do have to take it out of an administrative review and take it to a public hearing. But there's still nuance there. That process itself can account for the degree to which the park is changing and hopefully not impose undue burdens.
I'm curious, in the past, I've seen developers try to say, okay, if I do 6, I'm going to have to go through a hearing, but if I do 3 today and 3 tomorrow, I can avoid the hearing.
Yeah, it's within a 5-year period. So that's how the department would look at those. Each request we would need to do that research to see whether the spaces had been added in excess of 5 in a 5-year period.
In a 5-year period?
That's right.
Okay, thank you.
How much more tax?
Wait a minute.
Oops.
Some more pieces to highlight for this are that the differentiation between health code and development codes, simplifying the development code. The resulting product is a few pages shorter than the current code. And then I want to talk about the Planning Commission recommendation, which was a unanimous vote to review for the Board of County Commissioners to approve the campground code update. They also reviewed and participated with the health code, although that's not within their purview. So that particular section was reviewed by the Health Board of Health. I'll also note that manufactured home parks are permitted differently. They are regulated under Title 18.42, which is just for manufactured home parks. This effort is for campgrounds, for tents, and RV camping. Next one, please. This effort did start in 2021, and the department made extensive outreach to campgrounds, campground owners, and countywide. We did multiple mailers, letters, and postcards, and had some owners attend the Planning Commission workshop meetings. There were 3 of those. The department also developed a how-to guide. We have some examples of that here on the counter, and it's up on the screen there. So that's a new customer-friendly feature that we can introduce once this code is in place. And then as for any law change, the State Environmental Policy Act checklist was filled out and reviewed in February of last year. And the Planning Commission completed their work with a public hearing that started on August 22 and was continued to October 19th. So that was the review process getting to this point. And then here I've got, just for background information, as a part of this update, research was done and we found that there are 26 parks in unincorporated Cowlitz County. The ownership of those parks is listed here. You can see the majority are locally owned. Some are owned by Pacific Corp. Three are publicly owned, and there's one out of state owner. Those parks comprise 1,682 spaces in total. And majority of those are operated year round. Some 6 parks do operate spaces seasonally. I'll also highlight for you that the median year built for these parks was 1972. So that is also reflective of this code update and the focus on how to deal with existing parks. The median park size is 46 spaces, and we note that the last time this code was touched was 1981, 1994, and 1998.
So Adam, I am a little curious, since we have a separate set of health code regulations, would those county health code regulations apply to campgrounds inside incorporated city limits?
That's my understanding, yeah,
Okay.
that the
Okay.
health
yeah.
department authority is countywide.
So I think we have authorized the construction of an RV park adjacent to the fairgrounds. There is one that they use. It's all informal. It's not improved with anything. So we want to make sure that the health standards are being met. That's inside the city limits. So they have city regulations for doing that, but the health code is still going to be enforced by Cowlitz County.
Yep, that's
Okay.
correct.
Okay, thank you.
So
Thanks,
if I could pursue that, it's really a good question. It's confused me frequently. So we could pass whatever building codes we'd like. They may not apply within the city limits, but the health codes do.
Health codes do, yeah. We'll probably need to remember that in the next hearing.
Yes.
That's a little bit out of turn on that.
All right, so this is our conclusion, and just identifying all the factors that were considered by the planning commission and staff and brought up by the public as part of this code update process. We also provide the definition of campground here for your reference, and I'll just note that it is referring to a commercial operation containing 3 or more. So there's some important distinctions there, that these are commercial businesses, that they are open to the public for lease or rent, and that they do have to exceed 3 spaces to be considered or even permitted as a campground.
Do we have any requirements for the maximum amount of time a camper can be there?
The approach this code takes, and as I understand it, the existing code takes, is the owner and operator of these parks shall submit their rules of operations with the application. That gets considered at a public hearing. So the owner is going to dictate the length of stay and occupancy within the parks. That does get discussed, it gets considered, it gets advertised as part of the public hearing process so that everyone can understand what is being proposed. And it could potentially result in a condition of approval through the hearings examiner process if what the owner is proposing is not consistent with the comprehensive plan or with the expectations of surrounding neighborhoods and compatibility that people might bring up at that public hearing.
So facility A could have a rule that says maximum occupancy 3 weeks. And facility B could have one that says maximum occupancy is 18 weeks.
Yeah, we leave that to the owner developer to propose that.
And
set
if
of
there are
rules.
violations, that's a civil suit rather than a county or.
I think that's correct. Violations within those owner renter,
Yeah,
yes.
okay, thank you.
relations.
Because often we will be called to try and police something and we typically lamentably have to say that's a civil problem.
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay.
And again, you said the planning commission has reviewed this and unanimously recommended our approval.
That's right.
That's a good question because I know I count heavily, I think we all do, on the recommendations of the planning commission. So it's important us to get the feedback of the people through the planning commission. Any other questions for you, Dennis?
No, I think we're ready for the public hearing.
So,
You want me to hang it for you?
yes, please.
Okay, public hearing is over.
So this is the opportunity for anybody on Zoom or it's on the wrong side, that's left.
It's the right side to the audience.
So this is opportunity for public comment, question. I don't see any hands of any of the participants. There are 7 panelists and 19 attendees. We'll give it a moment or two.
So several weeks ago, we had some heated discussion from folks at an RV park, but I think that was one of the more permanent trailer parks, long time. That's not covered by this. That's a whole different set of regulations for RV
That's
permanent
correct.
homes.
That's correct.
Right, okay.
Hello,
Hi.
I could hardly understand anything you were saying on your microphone. And the other, a question is, do you have a copy of all that paperwork? So somebody could actually read it and understand it? Can you still hear me?
Yes, copies are available of all materials and the proposed ordinance.
So anyway, you have copies of them here today?
Yes, we do.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, these microphones are testy.
Yes, they are.
There, we have this online also, don't we, Kelly? Did you hear that, ma'am? No, okay. I don't hear any other comments, although the gentleman with the bandana had a comment. If he'd like to make it, this is the time to do it.
No. You made a comment earlier and we shut you down because it wasn't open for that. So now's the time to, yeah.
What,
You're not obligated to make a
I
comment.
just, I just talked to, one of my, buddies here and he said that it won't be taxed. This code won't be taxed, but you know, in the long run, I'm thinking.
You got to speak for you got a
I'm thinking
whole
it will
world
be-
listening.
It will
to
be
you.
taxed because we don't get nothing for free, right?
Well, to the best of my knowledge, this has no monetary direct impact, maybe even indirect, other than it's probably beneficial if somebody who owns the business wants to expand by 3 spaces, the amount of delay to get that accomplished is almost 0. So that's beneficial. I don't know of a downside. Is there a downside, you gentlemen?
Not that's been brought up.
Not at the moment, right?
That's correct.
So.
Not until next year, right?
So actually, I mean, there are some application fees, pre-application conference fees to help fund the office operations for
Sure.
review. But again, this is designed to allow for small expansions to be dealt with administratively, and those fees would be correspondingly much less. But you did raise the question about taxes. Obviously, if a private property owner develops property, the value of that property goes up and the assessor will mark that down. And, you know, there will be additional taxes for that property owner. That's all part of investing in property. You hope that your investment will bring you more money than the costs. Otherwise you wouldn't do it.
Okay, all
So,
right.
but this is not a tax increase measure.
Oh, okay, great. That's great. Well, you know what? I'm just taking a little bit of this, from the Cowlitz County, you know? And I'm talking about the whole thing, this whole world, this whole country is failing right now because of Biden and the old family.
Okay, let me pull you back in to stay on topic. So
Yeah.
are we
yeah,
good?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you. So I think at this point it's appropriate. Oh, okay. More.
Just a couple of things. I think this is a great example of being proactive, putting something into place that if I were an investor or wanting to bring in a campground, you've clearly laid out the policy that I can make a good business decision on and act upon that. So my hat's off to you. I think this is awesome to be this way and to put it into writing, because it's what a property owner can count on if I want to develop that. And to analyze again, how is that going to affect my taxes, or what can I do on this property I have? How many sites can I do, and the whole rest of it. So I mean, it's almost surprising to me that it hadn't come up sooner. I didn't realize it's as old as that is. But again, if nobody's pushing buttons or saying anything about it, it doesn't matter. But it's like, it's one of these things that you build it and they will come. We get some of these regulations in place, and then if our developing people who are soliciting development within our county can be able to help landowners realize what opportunities are available to them, you have it in place. So I just think this is a great thing. I appreciate the public hearing.
Well, and a great comment. Thank you for that. The other thing that this change encourages is expansion, because we don't require them to go through a full new permitting process. And smaller expansions do add up in time, and that meets that public demand for more camping ground.
Well, and again, I'm reminded at the time I lived in Montpelier, Idaho. And we were trying to see the opportunity for economic development there. Well, just across the border, they're harvesting oil out of the ground. I asked a simple question of somebody I knew that worked in the state level in the legislature, who was over energy and that kind of stuff. Why don't we do anything over here? And he didn't really have a good answer. So I went to a friend who worked for Mobil down in Texas, and he said, you don't have any rules in place. Idaho does not have any rules on how they would treat somebody pulling oil out of the ground. So why is a big oil company going to start doing that? They don't know what they can count on. So this is, to me, is exactly the same thing. Why would I get into that? I don't really know what's available. And so good job.
Thank you. I certainly appreciate the comments, and piggybacking on my colleagues' comments. We have been working for quite a number of years to try and shift the perspective. We need the citizens to be involved, and it wasn't that long ago that it seemed like that was not an encouraged activity. We have, in the case of building and planning, an excellent change in attitude. And I say change in attitude, at least demonstrably from the public side, that says, yeah, they're here to help us, not here to hinder us. And just a little tweak on that is a precious change. So I appreciate the staff on that. Well, I was about to drop the hammer. The public portion of this hearing is over. And now,
Mr. Chairman, I move that we adopt the county code 18.56 campground and recreation facilities as proposed and recommended.
the motion on the table is to adopt the county code. And I wait for seeing if anybody has any more comments. Let's go to the vote. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
I also vote aye. Motion passes. Thank you, gentlemen. And I see the next team coming up. So if you'd all like to take a moment and pick up any of the documentation, feel free. I'll You have a customer. You have a tough act to follow.
There we go. Season long, Health and Human Services. Today, we are proposing a new code, the General Sanitation Requirements for Cowlitz County Campgrounds. That'd be Cowlitz County Code
Could you make
1545.
sure you accentuate your public speaking skills?
I will try.
Thank you.
So we're proposing this new code today to go in tandem with the building and planning code that was just presented. As Adam stated earlier, one of the primary reasons for this code update is to separate the development standards from the health standards. That was one of the major reasons for this update, to really clarify the authority and responsibility of the two departments. We did a lot of outreach and engagement with the community, as Adam also mentioned. The Building and Planning Department really spearheaded this effort starting in the fall of 21. They went out to the RV parks and campgrounds. They engaged the owners. They did many flyers and invited the owners to attend the Planning Commission meetings where the Building and Planning Code and Health Code were discussed extensively. The health section of the Campground Code was brought to the Planning Commission for review in September of 22. There was a SEPA review that was completed with our code in November of 22, which allowed a 14-day comment period. We did not receive any public comments at that time. The Board of Health also reviewed the code before you today on 4 separate meetings. It was discussed. And then the draft code has been posted to HHS website since February.
Out of curiosity, do you have any idea how many people did review that online?
But I don't know.
Okay, it's unlikely that it hit the New York Times best book list.
It's not made our top 10 landing page websites. We do look at like our top 10 pages, and it's not made the top 10, but we could
Okay,
look.
thank you. That's good enough.
So just a little bit about the code adoption process. Again, the SEPA review was completed in November. The code was introduced to the Board of Health in January. At that meeting, we were asked to produce a red line version of the code, which we presented in February. We did a work session with the Board of Health in early March, and on the March 8th meeting, the Board of Health unanimously voted to move this process forward and bring it to public hearing. So some of the highlights of the update include separating out the health and development standards, as we've discussed, clarifying authority and responsibility. We did update some code references and RCW references. We updated some existing definitions and added definitions to again align with the building and planning code. So we're both talking about the same things when we talk about what a campground is and what a camping unit is. We expanded the number of exempt camping spaces on a private property. In the old code, you could have 1 camping space. The new code allows up to 2 camping spaces, and then you're exempt from these code requirements.
So excuse me, on that, when you go from even the 2 spaces, is there a long list of requirements for what constitutes a camping space? Like if I have the property and my niece wants to come and camp there, do I really need a permit through EHU for doing that?
So in the old code, if you already had an existing RV on site that was lived in, and then your niece wanted to come and move an additional RV on site, the old code would require you go through a campground review process. The new code, you're exempt from that. The campground review process starts with 3 or more spaces.
So how does the public know, like in the case where there was no previous existing camp RV or something like that, how does somebody know? Like, I would not have known that I needed to come to talk to you.
Yeah. I mean, oftentimes, honestly, it's based on complaints. A neighbor will complain that people are moving RVs on site, and that's when we get involved.
So it's just if a neighbor says, I don't like seeing that thing there.
Yeah, we're not going around the county looking for habited RVs and making that determination. It's really complaint-based.
Okay, thank you.
And
Oh.
the concern when it finally comes to us is usually over sewage disposal. Where's the gray water go? Where does that
Correct.
waste go?
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
particularly if you live downhill from that site, you're a little concerned, so.
Yeah, absolutely. Some other highlights, we clarified the process for temporary use permits, including temporary and construction campgrounds. We added some language around expansion and modifications, again, to align with building and planning. And we outlined the process for operating requirements and lieu of an annual operating permit, which is what the old code required. So those are the highlights. And I'm happy to answer questions.
So in a hypothetical situation where my niece drives up from Oklahoma and she parks her RV on my property, overnight, we have no issue. Over 2 weeks, we need to talk to the AHU.
So there's not a timeline set in there. Again, it would be a complaint and we would contact the property owner and try to get more information about the length of stay. You know, what is their intent? Is this a permanent situation? Is this a temporary situation? And work with planning on what that looks like moving forward.
All right, and let's say the neighbor calls and says, we don't think this is legitimate or something like that. You come out, you look, and the property owner then wants to get approval. How much is it going to cost them? How long is it going to take them?
Well, we'd have to work with building and planning because it's a dual process. So they would, if they're gonna have permanent sites, 3 or more, then they'll have to go through the public hearing process, as Adam
You
kind of
have to speak.
discussed. Oh, sorry. As Adam discussed, go through the public hearing process and get approval that way. And during that process, we would ask about sewage disposal and garbage collection and the sanitation portion of
So the
that.
first 2, it's up to the homeowner to regulate. You're
Yes.
not involved.
We're not involved. They are exempt.
So as long as you want your sister, your daughter to stay, she can stay.
As long, and for as long as there are no complaints.
Well, the complaint would have to be there's more than 2, right? I mean, that would,
Well, or
that would be the trigger.
there's sewage or
Or
there's
there's
garbage
sewage on the ground.
issues on the property, then we
Or
would address
just
it.
like a lot of complaints we get, which is, I don't like my neighbor,
Yeah, well,
so I'm gonna make his life uncomfortable.
and it never happens, right, Susan? Yeah, I mean, that's,
I wish I could fix that. I'm sorry.
So, so I still don't know how much it would cost to get EHU approval.
So the application process, we currently don't have a fee set up. That's something we could discuss during the next, fee review process. There is an inspection fee. We do annual inspections. And there is a fee associated with that because of the work that is.
And that's in
required.
a document apart from this document.
A document.
The fee should be
Fees.
stated.
a fee schedule.
Yeah, a fee schedule. Yeah. Sorry.
Okay.
Yeah, the annual inspection is described in the code.
Okay.
And then fees are set by the board.
Okay. I asked the question a little bit earlier that because the county is in the process of developing an RV park inside the city of Longview at the fairgrounds, do you have health jurisdiction over that campground inside incorporated city limits?
Yes, we do. We would do inspections on that facility.
So you had mentioned that you coordinate with the county planning division over the county code.
Mhm.
How, you'd have to, you're not using the county code. You wouldn't use the county code inside the city limits.
Correct. We would not, we would work with the city on that.
So the title of the, on the agenda is General Sanitation Requirements for Cowlitz County Campgrounds. That's inclusive.
Correct.
Oftentimes, if it just says Cowlitz County, it's just the unincorporated area, but
Yeah,
it's more inclusive.
it is. And it
Okay.
is very explicit in the code that it is countywide.
Is there a way we could adopt over time that would allow people to know when we mean the county unincorporated and the county everything?
Yeah.
Because that's a good question.
So that's probably a question for our chief civil deputy, perhaps. And I think he's online.
I am.
Ah, there he is.
So it gets a little complicated with the health department because the authority of the health officer is coextensive with the county, which is just a fancy name of saying exactly what Commissioner Weber said is that it's countywide. So in instances where there is a health concern, even within the city limits, although these regulations wouldn't be applied as part of their development process, the health department could nevertheless still approach the city or the very particular jurisdiction with concerns about the development activity creating health issues within the greater Cowlitz County area. So when Season talks about working with the city on citing an RV area or camping area within the city limits, that's exactly what she's talking about, is that the health department would work with the various jurisdiction on the health issues and concerns. And the health regulations that we might implement for our own RV camping, they would be treated more as a benchmark by the health officer in the health department to approach the city on saying, we'd like you to do this, we'd like you to do that in terms of protecting the overall public health and safety.
Now, the city might have a different threshold. This proposal says 3 or more requires review or, attention and permit. Say, the city of Longview might say, no, the first 10 are okay. Well, if there's a health problem that we discover, our health department can still intervene and implement guidelines and regulations and requirements.
Yeah, it would be, again, in instances like that, these regulations are viewed as a benchmark for what constitutes a public health nuisance. And that's how the health officer and the health department would approach the city with their concerns.
Good. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Appreciate that. Okay.
Thank you. Time to open up the public hearing, and that magically happens when I do this. Public hearing is open. This is a time for the public, either online or in person, to comment, speak.
I have a question because I'm going through this right now with the. So what you're proposing is on private ownership, they can go from 1 RV to 2. So if they're not enforcing right now on 1 RV, the trash and all that, then it allows them to have 2 RVs to not enforce. Because I'm noticing an enforcement problem in the county when it comes to that. I live in the county, I'm going through this, so it's kind of the neighbor and the junk and the trash. So that's what I'm trying to clarify. It's allowing a private owner to go from 1 RV to 2.
That's correct, but enforcement would happen under different regulations. So we have solid waste code and we have the septic code that speaks to maybe the concerns that you have around garbage or
Right.
potentially, sewage on the ground because there's additional units on site. So it would be exempt from the RV park code, but we still have other regulations that we could enforce.
Gotcha.
So if the problem is a public health problem,
Right.
doesn't matter how many they have. I mean, you have jurisdiction to help resolve that issue.
That's correct.
Thank you.
I know, we've worked with neighbors before who have a disagreement over how much stuff is stored on the property. Is that junk or is it a solid waste issue? And that's again, one of those gray areas that require judgment and tact and diplomacy. Because one person's trash is another person's treasure, believe it or not. So, I mean, that's always part of the struggle that we have in making sure the enforcement is appropriate.
There, from the public standpoint, I believe there is an expectation that if I call the HU, that they'll come out in some time frame, call that time frame A, and render a decision in time frame B, and in time frame C, the problem will be cleared up. My guess is time frame C is something that the public expects to be rather short, but can be rather lengthy and onerous. Could you address A, B, and C?
Yeah, so depending on the complaint, if it's a liquid waste complaint, sewage on the ground, people are smelling sewage, that has a higher level of risk. And so our policy says, we reach out, they have 5 days to respond. Their timelines on response are much shorter before we could potentially go to enforcement, like a civil infraction if we're not getting a response from the property owner about our concerns. Solid waste doesn't reach that level. So the response period is a little bit longer. Once we send a letter, the homeowner has 30 days to respond, and we follow our enforcement process, which again is a little bit longer because it doesn't rise to that level of public health risk like raw sewage does. But again, we could end up in civil infraction if we don't get a response from the property owner. If we do get a response and they reach out to us, they're submitting receipts with disposal, we consider them to be actively complying. And so the process can take a little bit longer. And we try to tell people who are complaining about different properties, the expectation of timelines. We're not going to be able to get out there and fix it tomorrow, but this is our process and this is the timeline you can expect.
So I wanted to, it typically would come to us once there are people that don't get along, recalcitrant, I'm not going to cooperate. So the question then is on timeline A, am I correct in having heard that it's about 5 days is what you would expect that you'd have someone on the ground going to see and inspect or verify, assess the complaint. And then timeline B is you go back to the office and you write something up, a formal letter.
Yes, so we will go and investigate the complaint and verify it. Let's say
About 5 days.
Yeah, we try to get out within a week. Yeah, if it's a solid waste complaint, for example.
Yeah.
If it's a liquid waste complaint, we try to do it shorter than that, again, just because of the level of risk. So let's say it's a solid waste complaint, we'll go do an inspection within a week, we'll document it, we'll send a letter, and we'll follow our enforcement process. I think we reach out 2 additional times to the property owner, and then we can move to civil infraction. And really that's the last resort. Typically when we send a letter, I would say 85% of the time, we do get a response from the property owner. And a lot of times they just are unaware that what they're doing on their property is considered a problem. And so we do have a very high compliance rate just with educating the public on, what is considered to be.
And then after that, if they're non-compliant, that 15%, what's the process there?
So we can do a civil infraction where, we go before a judge and they can, basically give their side of the story as to maybe they don't consider it to be waste, maybe they don't, whatever their excuse or reason might be for not responding to us or clean up the property. Typically, if they don't respond, a lot of times they don't show up to court either. And they're found to be committed, and then it typically will go to collections. And at that point, we really are starting over with the process again. So
And that could be many months, right?
it could be many months.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you. Looks like someone took, oh, were you gonna say something, Mr. Jensen?
Working on it. Pardon me. The next step in the process, if there is a clear threat to the public, things, and I think Commissioner Weber talked about gray water or black water being discharged directly on the ground and migrating off the property. The next step would be to file what's called a warrant of abatement and seeking a permanent injunction. Again, it takes a little time to work its way through the court system, but in the end, what you get is an order from the court to remove the public health threat and assess or lien the property for the cost of the removal. And you also get a permanent injunction from the court to not repeat the behavior, which gives you a fast track back into court with a contempt filing motion if they show up again with the public, health issue with another trailer or whatever. And that takes much less time once you get the original order. So that would be the next step if in fact civil enforcement is unsuccessful.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
So we're still in the public portion of the hearing. I don't see any comments.
Okay, my question is do you like have a list of what public hazards are, like, what you consider a public hazard?
So typically the complaints that come to us revolve around solid waste, so garbage on the property, demolition, construction debris, or sewage on the ground, or the smell of sewage, on a neighboring property. Those are the typical complaints that come to us.
Because like if somebody like had a older vehicle, but they were using it, it just didn't look really great, but it actually was cooler than it looks, would that be a problem?
So vehicles, there is a halt vehicle ordinance that the county has. We do not enforce that ordinance. In talking to Doug Jensen over the years, the way that it's written doesn't give us the latitude to enforce it very well. And so we have just decided not to. So an older vehicle on a piece of property is something we're not going to enforce removal.
Because I have some learning to do on what you're discussing, and please don't mind me saying so, but you really need to, as I do, learn to use this better.
I'll
As
try,
with
sorry.
Other people too, thank you.
Well, I think we've reached the time to close the public portion of the hearing. That was the magic hammer.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we adopt County Code 15.45, General Sanitation Requirements for Campgrounds, as proposed.
There's a motion on the floor to adopt the county code 15.45 as has been discussed.
And again, I want to mention that this has been recommended for approval by both the Planning Commission as well as the County Health Board, which the three commissioners sit on, but it's part of the state law that we get to look at it a second time.
Yep. Well said. Let me call for the vote. I call for the vote.
I will vote aye.
Oh, yes. I vote aye also. Motion passes. Thank you. That brings us back to the time where we can have public testimony on any topic of choice? And if there is none, we will close the meeting. So let me pause for about half a minute or a minute and see if we have anybody that, oh, I see a hand up by an attendee. Let me see who that is. Go ahead, Whitney Rab.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
I have a question about I think it's called the Sunshine Law in the open public meetings and violations. And I didn't know if I could ask you guys, because you guys I figure would have knowledge.
What's the circumstance?
So our current mayor had a private meeting, invitation only, where 4 council members were there, which created a quorum. And I'm trying to delineate whether or not that violates that sunshine law.
Let me defer to you.
So it was a private meeting. It was not open to the public. Was it publicized ahead of time?
It was not publicized ahead of time. Public people were invited by email, only certain people. It was also at a facility that wouldn't hold enough, it only would hold a certain number of people. But it wasn't open to the community completely, nor was it published anywhere. And things regarding our city's election as well as the city were discussed.
So you sound like you have the elements for a complaint, but neither Commissioner Mortensen nor I are lawyers, and you're asking a legal question as to whether or not you have enough evidence to go to the next step, which would be to file a complaint. If the public's business, if policy was discussed in a private meeting, I mean, that's on the face of it, that's not allowed. But you have to find out some other information about who was informed and whether that fits, but.
Yeah, because there were also 2 of the 3 city administrators invited to the meeting. The actual city administrator and the public works director.
Mhm.
And so I don't really know what the next step is.
I was going to ask you, Dennis, what the next step is for this person. Typically, they contact the SAO.
The state auditor could be informed. I mean, that's one avenue. The state's attorney general. You might actually contact the city's lawyer to see, or to allow them. We get reminded all the time by our lawyer, in terms of the process and procedures and what we need to do to avoid violations of that. So he may have more information on that particular instance, but then if he didn't know about it, that's another concern that he would need to express.
Just to be clear, the lawyer, our lawyers typically will, the issue is, if we plan a meeting or we plan to discuss something, we frequently check with them and they apprise us of their assessment of what that would mean from what we generally call the OPMA, Open Public Meetings Act. So
the county does not have oversight. We can't enforce the law on a city because they're separately elected. They're independent from us. So Oh, there's not, like, we can't have we can't ask the sheriff to go enforce the law. That it doesn't work like
Right.
that, but
Can this person call the sheriff?
well, you could, you're not gonna, but he doesn't have jurisdiction inside cities, so. And the chief of police work for the people that you're complaining about, so. Yeah.
And he was there
And so
as
does the
well.
lawyer too, yeah. So, so, and quite honestly, as is sometimes the case, the power of the press can also have an influence on publicizing meeting violations. And so that's also an issue. I think on our list of attendees, we do have a newspaper reporter, so contact the Daily News if it's a city that the Daily News serves. And I don't know what other journalists you could contact about publicizing that fact.
If you'd like, send me an email and I will answer your question in email, giving you the assessment as much as I can as who it is that you should contact in a sort of order of priority of opportunity for success.
Okay. Yeah, I just, before I started going down that rabbit hole, it seemed to me like that would violate the Open Meetings Act, but it's not something that I knew enough about to. So I thought you would be a great person to ask since you're having the meeting today.
Yeah, it is a good question. I think some of our hemming and hawing is, for example, my colleagues and I may attend, well, like this evening, there's a Longview City Council meeting. I have no idea whether any of my colleagues are going to attend. I'm going to try to attend. So if two of us show up there, all of a sudden somebody could say that's a violation of the OPMA. To me, that would be a preposterous accusation. And I don't know the circumstances in this case, but you do want to explore it if it had anything to do with what we call a lack of transparency. If my colleague and I are at the Longview City Council and we're sitting opposite ends of the room, it's kind of hard to argue that we're conspiring in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah, this had to do with things going on in the city as well as candidates who are running against the current council and mayor.
Yeah. Completely appreciate the situation. Send me the email and we'll see where we can go from there.
All right, thank you so much.
Thank you for the comment. Any other comments? Okay, I think we're done, right?
Yeah, that's a very interesting situation. Number one, I don't know if you and Dennis went to the same meeting. There's nothing to say that you're not colluding because everybody that you see in a meeting is sitting there doing this. So there's collusion going on regardless of whether you're sitting together. And I certainly wouldn't depend on the Daily News to expose any wrongdoing.
Those are good points. Thank you. We're at 10:44, at 10:45, absent any other comments, we'll close the meeting. Dennis, have you ever seen an OPMA violation accusation go right to the end of like the court, or how does that work?
What's much more common is public request for public documents going to court and fines being levied on that. That happens a little bit more often. Every the accusations often fly during campaign seasons too, so
Yeah.
we're definitely in the midst of a campaign season. And I know that it is against the law, same Open Public Meetings Acts forbids public officials from doing campaigning activities in a public meeting or using public facilities for that, so that's also one of those trigger points. That if they're doing that as part of a public meeting, then that's not supposed to happen.
Okay, thank you. Before I close the meeting, let me do some advertisement. Don't forget, we have a meeting this afternoon also, and our Wednesday meeting is in the evening, right? And that should be pretty interesting. We're going to be learning about our current knowledge or progress on elk hoof rot disease. And is there anything else on that Wednesday agenda?
No. I don't think so. I think that's
it?
that's the posted. Although we always have miscellaneous and we always have opportunities for executive sessions as needed.
Okay, and this afternoon, it's just a normal work session.
Great.
Okay, this meeting is now adjourned.